Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher. I use he, him, and z, them pronouns.
And I'm Jessica. I use they/them.
And I'm Lily. I use any pronouns.
And welcome to our latest episode of Speak Out, which will be all about intersectionality. Quick round of applause for our newest member of the podcast, Lily. Thank you so much.
Yay.
Clap, 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 clap,
Thank
clap.
you.
And our, although people on YouTube will not be able to see, 3 other people who are also here, who are from OutWrite. Thank you for joining us. But yeah, today it's Black History Month. It's also Marfan Awareness Month, which is particularly important to me as someone with Marfan. So we decided today we're going to be talking about intersectionality. I did have the definition officially of intersectionality on my notes, but then I realized I forgot to pull them up. So a summary, intersectionality was coined by the academic Kimberly Crenshaw, who, fun fact, works at UCLA in the law school, to basically talk about how no single identity within a person can function separately from their other identities. So race and gender are inherently intertwined, disability, class, etc. And it's a way we can talk about compounded oppression, compounded privilege and oppression, and give a more nuanced take on how we navigate society. So we're going to be talking about our own experiences with intersectionality, along any of those lines, how the queer community can improve, some positive instances of intersectionality that we've seen, and hopefully get a lot of perspective. So Judah, you were particularly passionate about this topic. So if you'd like to go first.
So yeah, my intersection queerness and my left love. I identify as Chicano. That is, I am Mexican. That is, the Latino that I am under. Like, how you check a box? Like, are you Hispanic or Latino descent? Which one are you? Like Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican. I check Mexican. Yeah. Other than that, I don't really have any other identities I think that come back. Well, I guess I am non-binary, bisexual.
I guess I'm gay and trans. Yeah.
Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I've been so used to it now that sometimes I forget that that's like a thing.
Yeah. It's like a weird, normal thing.
Yeah, you've been so you're so used to it that you just kind of oh shit, I forgot, huh? Yeah, I am actually particularly interested in this topic because I do think that a lot of people miss the plot when it comes to intersectionality. I think a lot of people kind of use it as a buzzword. And I don't mean that in the boomer conservative sense. I mean that people will use intersectionality to justify really shitty, crappy. Sorry, I don't know if we're gonna be censored.
It's okay. We can swear. We're adults.
Really shitty behavior. I do think a lot of people use their queerness to not do the work for to not confront racism and ableism in the community. I do think a lot of people hide behind their queerness.
I can't be racist if I'm non-binary.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived with queer white roommates in the past, and it's a psychologically jarring experience. Because before that, I was living pretty much alone because of the pandemic. I was with no one. Well, I was with somebody, but she kind of we kind of lived separate lives. We weren't really running into each other. Because we lived in an apartment. It was two bedroom. It was not such a huge deal. Then I moved into a apartment with 3 other white queer roommates. And it is a psychologically jarring experience. Because you can tell that they didn't do the work. They're oh yeah, I'm not racist. But then proceed to do racist things.
The hashtag BLM in bio, but does a microaggression.
Right. I've been I would set a basic boundary and I was seen as the aggressor because I'm brown.
Wow.
Yeah. I would be hey, we need to we had a strict policy about because of COVID. And I was I told my roommate, and I was hey, just let me know when your partner is staying over. Make sure you let me know so that way we can, keep track. I was called homophobic.
Judah, I need you to leave. How dare you?
No, I was called homophobic for setting that basic boundary, and I was
wow.
I was this is so
I don't care about your boyfriend. I care about
Yeah,
your
I was
boyfriend's
like-
COVID,
I was
okay?
like, I don't necessarily care. I care about the fact that one, it was entitlement to my space because we.
Oh,
because
you shared rooms,
yeah,
right?
we shared rooms, and I was like, that was my space too. I'm entitled to living in that space, you know, without having to feel awkward.
Not them colonizing your space.
Exactly.
So sad.
And I was like, I just asked for a heads up, right? Like that wasn't like a
Please tell me.
yeah, like I wasn't like, oh no, your partner can't come over. I was just like, hey, let me know. Let me know. Because like there are some like that year I was swamped. I was swamped with work and classes. And I was like, hey, let me know. So that way I can be prepared. You know, I can move my stuff, I can go to the library or something, whatever. It was like but I was seen as the aggressor. Yeah, so I was like seen as the aggressor. I've been tone police. There was one time we were watching Suicide Squad. I was watching it with two of my roommates and one of our mutual friends, and we were watching Suicide Squad, the James Gunn remake. And that movie, like essentially, like they're killing everyone, every person of color on screen, right?
Oof.
Like it's set in like a Cuba-esque island. I think it's the
generally
outdoor
yellow
was for
toned.
Cuba. Yeah, and I was like, and I mentioned I was like, hey, you know, like that movie was really uncomfortable. Like it gives off very like genocidal vibes, and I was told that I was overreacting, that it was just a movie that didn't have like it was a silly like supervillain movie, like it shouldn't be like it wasn't that serious.
No, that's not the vibe.
Like in the end too, it's a fucking movie and I'm allowed to
Yeah.
have an opinion on it. Like you don't
True.
James Gunn does not need your
I was like,
your
James,
defense,
I was like, James Gunn doesn't. First of all, James Gunn doesn't need your defense, and also, I was like, there is a long legacy of movies that depict brown and black people as the other. There's a really famous movie in Texas that was modeled after Birth of a Nation, called The Birth of Texas, and it was about the Mexican-American War. Guess who was the aggressor? Guess who was, guess who, the white people had to fight against. And then, I had my ex-roommate I was having previous problems with. He was like, he tried to compare it to the bury your gays trope. And I'm like, they're not the same. Like, seeing mass people die that look exactly like you is not the same as bury your gays. Because I feel like at least with bury your gays, it's a little bit more respect.
Like they die, but it's not like they're brutally murdered.
Right, they're not,
like it's
brutally
usually
murdered on screen.
they're like a part of the plot in some way, meaningfully.
And it's just like, and I'm like, that's how I know you haven't done the actual work to like.
And when we say work, it means like literally just fucking think about it, like for a second and unpack maybe this, or like it's like, this isn't really a fair comparison, but the way from my perspective that I think about it is like when people misgender you by accident.
Yeah.
Instead of immediately becoming defensive, think, okay, I made a mistake. Now I need to practice, or I need to do research, or I need to literally unlearn, okay, when I accidentally do that, this is what I should do instead. Like nobody's asking white people to be perfect, although I wish we were a little closer to it as a community. But it's like, it's...
I don't expect perfection.
Yeah.
I do remember it during that moment being super, like, riled up.
Yeah.
Right? Because you watch this movie and you're seeing brown people being murdered in mass.
And it's like a comedy, too.
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's played for jokes. It's like, oh, ha, ha. And I'm like, this is such an uncomfortable space to be in, like, at this moment. I was like, I would not trust you. Like, I would not trust you, like, at all. Like, and I had another roommate who kind of like validated my feelings, which is really nice, and we're really good friends now. But like, they validated my feelings. I felt like kind of the same way. It was kind of like a gross movie. But all that to say that like intersectionality, I think, was meant to be more of an a way to discuss identity and not so much a defense
Mhm.
for your
I'm queer, I can do this.
yeah. Like a lot, I just think a lot of people hide behind their queerness. Like they really do. Gold star lesbians. Like it's just a lot of people hide behind their like, oh well, I'm like I'm gay. I can't be racist. Or I'm like
or like I'm just as oppressed as you,
yeah,
like saying shit like
exactly. And I'm like, well, no, you're not.
that.
Keep in mind that like my roommates. So I come from a low income background. My roommates did not.
Mhm.
That's also, I guess, another one of my intersectionalities, right? I come from a low income background. I came from a school that was like underfunded, and me and one of my roommates would talk about that experience particularly, and another roommate would come in and kind of like butt in and make the conversation about themselves. It was like,
my private school made my parents go into debt.
no, because it was always something I was like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about our experiences in schools that were underfunded, understaffed, like all sorts of, like, it's like a different experience. Your private school experience, like, I was like, your private school experience doesn't matter to me because we did not go to the same, like, first of all, we did not go to the same school. Second of all, it doesn't matter to me because you had the resources. Like,
and if you went to those public schools, they'd probably be better funded because you're rich.
Right, exactly. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, like I think like intersectionality is a really good way to talk about identity. I just think a lot of people use it to defend their own bigotry.
Yeah.
And their own really messy behaviors. Like it's just, there's a lot to say about that. Like I don't know. I think there's like so many things that like anger me always about this like conversation. We were talking last night about Sam Smith and fat phobia.
That if Harry Styles did the exact same thing in his skinny, cis straight body, that everyone's like, yes, this is the queer representation we want, despite a person being openly non-binary and expressing themselves in a queer way. Right. Like, that's the queer icon, not Harry Styles.
Exactly. And I was just like, a lot of people hid behind that defense that they're queer, so they can bag on.
Yeah, or like they just say like, oh, the outfit is ugly, or
like,
shit like that.
The outfit is ugly, or like, oh, something. It's just always an excuse. And I'm just like, we need to like really stop coming up with excuses. Like we need to like the community needs to look inward, because like I've had racist experiences on Tinder. I've had biphobic experiences on Tinder. I've had NB-phobic experiences like all over the place, and I'm just like, I can understand why a lot of people are exhausted to be part of a community that just doesn't take them seriously. And this is also why I said that I'm not in community with every queer. I'm in the queer community, but I am not in community with every queer.
Yep.
That's so true. Yeah, I remember one of the first queer events that I went to was like a Bruin Day kind of event with like a queer club. And it was like I felt the income disparity, like the wage gap between some of like the people that I was talking to, and they would be like, oh, like this guy is such an idiot, like he said les garçons, it's les garçons, and like just talking about like designer clothing and like how people who don't wear designer clothing are like, ew, it's giving poor. Like
it's not the appropriating AAVE to call someone poor.
Yeah, and it's just
shit.
Like, yeah, like, oh, my designer boots are so slay. And so, it's just like, it's like, okay, like you're queer and like we get that,
we get it.
Yeah, like you're queer and we get that, like, it's like okay to have like pride in how you look, and maybe like, like, oh, slay, and you're proud of like what you have, but like let's not mock people that maybe don't come from the same income realm as you for their pronunciation of things. And that also just has a lot to impact, just mocking people's pronunciation of anything, especially like designer brands. Like,
oh, I've been mocked many times for my pronunciations of things, and it always makes me feel bad.
It's like, it's almost horrible. Like people who decide to mock you, like if you're friends or, you know, you're close and you accidentally, like, I thought the
Yeah.
word epitome was epitome for a really long time. And like, if my friend decides to make fun of me for that, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But like making fun of a person of color who says a word in a different way, especially if like they're not familiar with it, is just like, what? Just politely correct them and be like, oh no, it's actually this. Did you know it was actually this? But no, that's impossible. Bullying is the way, actually.
The way. And then also to also like get into what Judah was talking about like movies and like people of color in movies.
Mhm.
It's like very macabre, but like me and like my bestie who is a white girl, it's okay. she's lovely. She tries her best, which is like why I feel like the reaction that she did when I pointed out like people of color die in movies. Like they're just expendable to the directors. Like, and so we like started like paying attention to movies and even just watching like Jurassic Park.
Oh wow,
Literally
yeah.
every single person of color that entered the screen would be dead by the end of the movie. And there would be like entire villages of people of color that would die. But like the one little white boy would be like safe the entire movie, even like chased by dinosaurs. And like nothing would happen to them because white people are untouchable in cinema. And if they are, then their deaths are considered tragic and have heavy weight. But people of color are just considered either aggressors or expendable in media.
I was watching Nope with my mom recently, and she asked me, she's like, how come? And my mom is not white, but she's not black. And we had a whole conversation about like Black history and stuff after watching this movie because she's not from America and doesn't know a lot about it. And she asked me, she's like, how come Jordan Peele picks like Black people to star in all of his movies? And I was having a hard time like explaining it because I am not Jordan Peele. So I looked it up, and the way he put it was so perfect, is like, I've seen that movie where the Black person is expendable and the white person is the hero. I would like, for once, if I have control of it, to make the Black person the hero and it's not a weird thing. And like, that's, his artistry is so beautiful because like people find it subversive that we're not killing Black people as the main thing in the movie, and like Black people are the triumph and the heroes and the protagonists. And it's like, it's 2023 and his first movie came out in 2017. Like, it took that long for people to be like, oh, maybe it's a little weird that in every horror movie the trope is the Black person dies first. Even like in the movie Freaky, which is like a Universal movie. It's like a body swap horror comedy. There's a gay character and a Black character, and at one point they're being chased by the killer, and the gay guy goes, I'm gay, you're Black, we're gonna die, and they like run away from the killer because it's like making fun of the fact that that's a trope. But you know, yeah, once you like see it for the first time, and of course people of color are going to see it and notice it earlier than white people, it's just, it feels like, not that it was ever excusable, but like at this point it's like, can we fucking move on? Suicide Squad, the remake, came out like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 3 years ago. Like, can we move on, please? Can we pick something else?
It's not a surprise though, because James Gunn is.
Yeah, isn't that like a thing?
Yeah, that's like a thing. Like he's kind of racist. Like James Gunn is you know,
problematic.
Problematic fave, I guess, of the broader mainstream. I forgot what I was gonna say. I was gonna add something and I completely forgot. But Jenna Ortega.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually really excited that Jenna Ortega became like a final girl. Because it's like the first time that I've seen a Latina like be the final girl. Like, it's just like, first of all, be included in the movies and also like be a final girl. I think
she's so good in X. She's so good.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah.
I mean, she's the poster. She's so good in that movie.
She is really good. She was in the Wednesday series on Netflix. Yeah, she got super big for that. But she was mostly known. I think she's in the Scream remake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch that tomorrow. I'm excited.
She's in the Scream remake, and then she was an X, and she started at Disney, which is a surprise because you'd never think like a Disney actress would like
become a horror actress.
Become a horror actress. But no, she did become a horror actress, and I think that's like good for her. Good for her, honestly. I don't like that she's working with Tim Burton on the Wednesday.
The classic racist guy who thinks black people don't fit his aesthetic.
Yeah. A lot of people did freak out about Wednesday being Latina. Like they
really,
you the meltdowns on Twitter.
But they hated that Gomez was visibly like Mexican too. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, they hated his name. Luis. I can't remember the name. His name. I apologize. Yeah, they did hate that. They hated that A, that he was Mexican, and B, that he was fat.
Yep.
That was like one of the big ones. They were like, oh no, he's not the attractive.
Even though he looks exactly like the original drawings of Gomez. It's the same.
That's the actor. Thank you, Kelly. Luis Guzman, yeah, they hated that he was fat. Like, they did not like that he was not the skinny Gomez that people remember from the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people were okay with Catherine Zeta-Jones, but like a lot of people did not like that was gonna play Gomez Adams. But even horror has its own set of issues,
and horror itself is like, it's interesting too because like the zombie genre in particular. It's funny because on the elevator ride up to here, multiple people who are in the rooms with us now are like, I can't do anything with zombies in it, but it's Christopher Zombie time. The original zombie movie by George Romero in the 1960s was one of the first movies in the genre to, if not the first, I'll have to fact check me on that, to have a black male protagonist. And the movie's been out since the 60s, so I'm going to spoil the ending. Sorry if you haven't seen it.
80 years to watch it.
Yeah. But he is killed by men who think he's the threat when it's the fucking zombies that are the threat. Like, that's the end of the movie. Like, and I don't think George Romero intended to make like a racial commentary. Like, the original point of the film was like class disparity. Right. But I think even that he chose to have a black man as the main actor expands his original intent to be a commentary on blackness, not just in horror, but just in generally society. And that,
well, to be fair, class commentary is racial.
Oh yes.
Yeah, like
even though people want to separate them and say class is the problem, as if you know,
because it's only like class is only interchangeable for white people, not so much for people of color. Like class and race kind of go hand in hand. Like, you're always going to be a second class citizen, no matter if you have like all this money. But yeah, no, continue.
But yeah, it's just interesting that like the history of the horror genre is embedded in commentary, and I was talking about it with my roommate the other day, that like horror is so beautiful to me because it reflects our fears of the time. So if you look at like post 9/11 horror, right? The United States was grappling with like this huge the biggest tragedy in American history. So for the next 5 or 6 years, all of the films were torture porn. They were all the worst things you could think of, because that was us as a society grappling with seeing the worst thing that we could think of. And of course, it was expressed in the Saw series and Hostel, which people considered super gross for obvious reasons. But at the time, it was like, because that's what we were living. And, you know, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre has like dozens, if not hundreds of academic journals writing about how it's a critique of the American dream and capitalism and all this stuff. But at the same time, despite those origins and that like metaphorical importance, the cliche is the person of color is going to die first.
And there's other cliches, right? You wrote an article about
syndrome
in horror movies.
Yeah, so, you know, transphobia, like Silence of the Lambs, the original Terrifier, Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp, honestly, I really loved that movie up until it was revealed that the main character, aka the killer, was trans. Because
wasn't there another recent movie that was like the same type of like, it was they/them or whatever?
Oh my god, yeah, they/them. Everyone was excited for that movie to be like a queer revenge movie, that like, because it was set in a conversion therapy camp, and everyone's like, oh, the queer people are going to gang up on the killer, and then the movie is just a killer who's from a conversion camp killing gay people. That's the plot of the movie. So it's like, thanks, Kevin Bacon. I really appreciate you being a star in this movie. This was a really great effort. Sarcasm.
And there is a huge, conversation not just about queerness in horror movies, but also disability.
Oh yeah,
disability and mental illness.
Yeah, I'm in a media representation class right now. Shout out to Rhonda, my professor. And we're doing our final project on representations of disability, mental illness, and femininity on screen. So like femininity in terms of like women's representation, in terms of like gay people and trans people. But with horror and disability specifically, the horror of disability is that you simply are disabled. Like there's if you look at me, it's as I said, Happy Marfan Awareness Month, everybody. But if you look at all of these movies like that star Doug Jones or Javier Botet, who were like the long, lanky character actors, who play like the leper from It, the serial killer in Gerald's Game, Tristana Medeiros from Wreck, the crooked man from Conjuring 2. Like there's all of these examples. It's like those characters are inherently scary to us because they look like a disabled body. And as like a disabled trans person, like now I'm double alienated, right? So like my favorite genre not only sees me as a villain, although horror typically targets people who are affected by trans misogyny, not as much trans men, but still, like sees me as someone wearing the skin of another gender, but it's also the literal encapsulation of what it means to be not human.
Right.
And yeah, it's like I think a lot with like media too is people think if it's not intentional, it doesn't have an impact. Oh, yeah. So like, who knows if James Gunn intentionally wanted all of the extras to be people of color, right? We don't know. He's never going to admit that, right? Yeah. But like the impact is we see a bunch of brown people killed mercilessly without any story, without any impact on screen. That's going to affect the population, just as I see my body portrayed as the only thing that people with Marfan syndrome specifically are portrayed as in film, because there are no films about us or about our disability specifically, unless you count like the 3 Grey's Anatomy episodes, is those films. So like now, I should have worn my Slender Man is a Marfanoid shirt. I like made a joke shirt about it because it's like, oh, well, great. The only thing that I can aspire to be is a horror villain. And, there's this piece, Eli Clare is their name. They're a genderqueer, disabled person who writes a lot about that conversation, that particular intersection. I did a piece called To Be Ugly in our fall 2021 print that had a couple quotes from them. But the whole point of that particular piece, I think it was called Gawking, Gaping, Staring, is that when those depictions exist and when visibly disabled and visibly trans people and visibly queer people, because they're also butch, traverse the streets, the only thing that people can think to do is to stare. And like me in my entire life, I always joke I'm visually impaired, so I can't tell if people are staring at me, but my mom can. So throughout my life, like my mom being beside me as a kid, I would, come up to there was this one instance I came up to the window after dropping off stuff at the post office. She'd like driven me to the post office, and she's like looking out the window at me, like with this horrible stare. And I'm like, what did I do? What's wrong? And she goes, it's that bitch behind you. And it's this old woman who I had walked into the post office, done my mail, and walked out. She stopped on the street, watched me walk in, waited for me to leave, and then followed me back up the hill to my car because she was like disgusted or fascinated or some combination with my body. And then when she was called out, she was like obviously scurried away.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's like calling out old people though, fun as hell, I gotta say. If they're, don't you know staring is rude? 85-year-old, like Jesus. It's
sport.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, it's funny because now, like, I've been out as trans for 5 years. I like pass most of the time. Right. And it's always wondering, am I being stared at because I'm like I'm, my chest isn't flat, or they think my voice sounds like not what a man's voice should be, like visible transness, or is it just because I'm disabled? Because it's usually
Right.
just because I'm disabled, but now there's that extra layer that I have to deal with. And I made some artwork for Look Deeper zine, which is an amazing publication like by and for disabled creatives, and a lot of them are also queer and trans. I did like a graphic for someone who did an article about trans and disabled joy. And I did a photo series basically depicting like my relationship with myself and my body in society. And it was one of the pieces in particular, which was my favorite, is called Youngest Old Timer. And it's like a picture. It's like, I can put it up on the screen for the YouTube video, but it's like my severed torso. I have it on my phone screen, but I'm recording right now, so I can't show it. It's like my severed torso, and it's like me, covering myself, which I often have to do at doctor's offices because I don't have top surgery. And like peeling off like EKG stickers from myself. And it's like this simple thing where like a visibly trans disabled body is, constantly interacting with the medical system. Like that's what the story is about. And I got this wonderful message from a fellow Marfanoid trans man who said, I have never seen my body represented in a way that is not ugly. And it's amazing seeing my body on somebody else who loves it. And who has appreciation for it. And like, that's what all of this is for, right? Like, that's why we're an OutWrite. That's why I make art and all this stuff, is like, because without community and without recognition that our identities are beautiful and worth fighting for, that we have nothing.
Right.
That's beautiful.
So that's what intersectionality should lead to. Like, it shouldn't lead to queer people feeling protected by their whiteness. It should be us using those privileges to make other people feel as comfortable as possible.
Exactly.
That's
and like,
awesome.
It's gonna sound controversial. I'm not grateful to UCLA because
fuck you, Gene Block. Genuinely, like sorry.
I'm not UCLA. I think it's very inaccessible to all sorts of people. Not like disabled. There's been conversation around campus being just inaccessible for
like literally inaccessible.
For wheelchair users, for people that have like physical disabilities that require a little bit more flatter ground. It's inaccessible to people who have like auditory processing issues, and it's just, and you have to go through it. It's just a whole thing. So it's not just inaccessible to disabled people, but it's also inaccessible to people of color. They've been locked out of this university for the longest time. Queer people, because of just the learning disparities from, especially like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where kids were being kicked out in math for being queer. And didn't have the same learning experiences as somebody who was cis, het, or straight. Cis, het, straight is a synonym for
extra straight.
But, it's just, the university is very inaccessible. I'm grateful for the orgs that have given me opportunities. I'm grateful to OutWrite. I'm grateful to my department. I'm grateful for my professors here. I'm not grateful to UCLA. I think they throw us crumbs. Speaking of intersectionality, they throw us crumbs. And then they expect us to be grateful for that.
To grovel for it.
Yeah, like, they still haven't implemented a lot of things that they said that they were going to implement I'm doing quotations, post-COVID, especially Gene Block, where he was like, I'm going to advocate for hybrid learning.
Oh my God. Oh, happy 1-year anniversary of the longest sit-in in UCLA history. Yeah.
Yep.
Where myself, as a representative of the DSU, in collaboration with the African Student Union and the Mother Organizations, which is a group of 10 organizations that represent racial and cultural minorities on campus. We slept in front of Gene Block's office for 16 days. That's after 10 to 20 years of all of those clubs representing students of color advocating for the bare minimum. And then the Disabled Student Union, who's a newer organization, we were conceptualized in in 2020.
Yeah, I think I wrote 2 articles about it.
Yeah, Judah was there. I slept on the floor for those 16 days.
I unfortunately had to leave early because I had to help my mom.
That's reasonable.
She got COVID.
Ironic. I wonder.
Needed help.
But like at that situation really put my life as and my privilege as a white person in perspective. I was the only white person on like kind of the leadership committee of that. I think it was like about 10 or 12 of us. And like there were serious conversations of like, okay, it is 5 p.m. on Friday. Legally, the place is closed and we can be arrested. And it was, can you put your body on the line if the police are going to come?
It was scary because there were times where people genuinely thought that they were.
Yeah, there was
definitely the police cars going around. They had security there.
They had the sheriff's office, which means UCPD called the sheriff's office for the county of Los Angeles to come and sweep and ask what we were all doing there. And they like implied that we were preventing Gene Block to coming in his office, all this bullshit.
I think there was also too, I mentioned this to you when the grad strikes were happening. They closed Murphy Hall.
Yeah, because they were fucking scared we were going to do it again.
Yeah, they were scared that there was going to be another sit-in, so they closed Murphy Hall. They had that shut down. They had police there, security there.
And the day of the sit-in, actually, they caught wind that we were going to go into Murphy Hall. We weren't planning to sit in at that point. We just said that we were going to go up to those offices. And the Center for Accessible Education is also in that building. And one of the people in the DSU who just had an appointment with their specialist, the doors were locked. So they tried to lock us out. And he was like, after my appointment, I'll make sure to keep the door propped open. So they were willing to bar essential resources for disabled students. The transfer office is in there. There's a bunch of service. Yeah, there's a bunch of services in there. And they were willing to shut it off because they were afraid of a bunch of marginalized people kicking their shit. And we did. And, you know, there have been a lot of strides for those organizations. DSU, I mean, we've only been fighting for a couple years, so like it makes sense that we didn't make the same strides as those other organizations who have been putting their blood, sweat, and tears in this for 20 years. But like,
I said a win is a win.
Oh yeah, win is a win. Yeah, but it's like being like that is intersectionality too. It's like in that space, I cannot prioritize myself because I am not the most important. Like people talk about the Impression Olympics a lot, and I hate that word because it implies like competition for the sake of like personal gain. But like when I tell you sit the fuck down, like we are not the voices in this situation, that, for example, like me as a white trans man, I cannot speak to the experiences and the oppression that Black trans women face. That's not me saying, oh, I must grovel to her because she is more oppressed than me. It's me acknowledging I have a lot of fucking privilege as a white guy, as a passing white trans man.
One of my biggest critiques for writers is that when they're writing pieces that are more politically charged, they need to be more accurate.
Yeah.
They need to be more accurate about the terms that they're using and why they're using it. We did a review on Abortion Weekend, and I had to be like, hey, you know, they're talking about the experience Black women face. Like, that is specifically their goal.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the experiences Black women face as women who have higher mortality rates, as women who are not just, you know, bombarded by normal patriarchy, right? You have racism,
medical racism, particularly.
Racism. I'm like, this is like them talking about their experiences as trans women, as Black women. And so like one of my biggest like critiques for writers is to, hey, be more specific.
It is not women of color, it is Black women.
Yeah, it's not women of color. It is not they're talking specifically about Black women. They say that in their you know, little spiel. They have like the play card, the playbill. And it says that in their spiel they're talking specifically about Black women. Because I think the critique levied at the play was kind of more that it did not include a lot of inclusive language.
Mm-hmm. I think we included that in our article about it.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, but also they weren't really they were talking about specifically the experience of Black women in their play. So it's just like intersection, like we definitely need to be more specific about what we talk about. Because like, yeah, the oppression Olympics, like the oppression Olympics argument never made any sense to me. Because like that's not how identity works.
Well, here's the thing. You know who uses oppression Olympics? White people.
True.
Because like you mentioned,
True.
white people can exchange their like for class in a different way than people of color can. And the only way that we can conceptualize oppression is through competition with others because we want to be the dominant. We want to be the winner.
There's a book about that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually there's a famous paper called The Possessive Investment of Whiteness. Excuse me. And then there's a book called The Sum of Us. And it talks about pretty much how so the biggest example of like racism is like the public pool debate.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 1950s, there was obviously communities of both Black people and white people, and they wanted to integrate the pools. That's how you got actually the interesting. That's how you got like private pools in the backyard. They weren't a thing until post integration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So people would rather spend money to build their own private pools in their backyards
than share a
than
pool.
share a pool with Black people.
Yeah.
And same thing with education. Same thing with because like a lot of the arguments against making education more accessible is, oh, where are you getting the funds from? UCLA is sitting on billions of
endowments.
Dollars. They can do it.
Half of their budget, at least, is administrative salaries. We spend more on policing than we do on disability services. It's shut the fuck up. What are you doing? What do you mean? Do you know how many taxes people in Los Angeles pay? Like,
I had a whole argument with somebody on Reddit about.
Oh, not Reddit. Oh no.
So I was
the white man's territory.
I had to delete Reddit because it's like so like.
It hurts you.
Reddit is so like right leaning. It is.
Oh, I deleted it when we did the sit, and I was like, no, sorry.
It was like so bad. It's like a cesspool of like racism and like misogyny, and it's like I don't know. It's I got an argument with somebody about like defunding the police. They're like, oh no, they defunded the police, and that's why there's a rise in crime. And I was like, actually, that's a lie. You know what they didn't? They didn't defund the police. They gave them more money. You can look at all of these.
You can read a single article.
Look at all these articles that say that they raised these police budgets by billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, tell me how that's defunding the police.
Yeah.
Explain to me. Explain to the class.
Please explain to the class.
Like
and then you get downvoted.
I did get downvoted.
Yeah.
No. And I was like, this is little facts that you can look up. Like there's no such thing as like defunding the police because most city councils refuse to do that.
Mm-hmm.
LAPD just got like a $3 million budget increase.
So yeah. Unfortunately, we're at our time. There's some folks outside. If we want to do it next week, we're going to be running our taped interview with Q, who's a Black trans artist. Speaking of intersectionality, he was amazing. He came to the OutWrite office yesterday.
Super down to earth.
Lovely. Everybody stream Q's music. He's releasing an EP on Valentine's Day. We'll talk all about it next week. But after that, if we want to do a continuation of this at any point, I think there's so much to talk about. And this has been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate. Thank you, Lily, for joining us. And if you'd like to join us next time, feel free. But to quickly give our little blurb at the end, you can follow OutWrite on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at OutWrite Newsmag. You can also read our articles we post twice a week on OutWriteNewsmag.org. That's right spelled WRITE. I have been Christopher.
And I've been Judah.
And I've been Lily.
And thank you for watching, listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.